Member for Kalgoorlie.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. May I first congratulate Mr Speaker on his election to his position and thank the House for the honour of being your Deputy Speaker. I thank the Governor for his speech on the opening of the 39th Parliament and congratulate the Premier and his team for his election to another term of a Liberal National Government. May I also congratulate all those who succeeded in winning a new seat in this House for the contribution they've already made through their inaugural speeches. It's very interesting to hear of everyone's diverse background and the skills and experience they bring to our Parliament. I think I'd be pretty safe in assuming that most, if not all, members present are not familiar with my first inaugural speech, so I'll provide you with a bit of background as to what brings me to this place. It's an absolute honour to be elected the member for Kalgoorlie, as that town is the place of my birth. Kalgoorlie has produced many members of Parliament over the life of our democracy, and I hope I acquit myself as well as those who've gone before me. My family are now in their fourth generation in the pastoral industry in the Goldfields. There's a great story of my grandfather, who was originally from Cornwall, setting down my grandmother, the daughter of a pharmacist in central London, on Menangana Station in 1926, and she asked where the house was, and she was told there wasn't one. The incredible struggle they had, carving out a new life for themselves as they faced the Great Depression, untimely death and dispossession, only to fight back so our family could continue on, is one that fills me with awe and great pride. My father and mother continued in the industry, and my siblings and I had the amazing upbringing that many view as typically Australian, but actually few experience. My early education was by correspondence and School of the Air, but the education I appreciated even more was that I received from the traditional Aboriginal people who lived there. Many times we went out with the ladies, and from them I learned some of the Wongai language, how to track, how to dig up and eat honey ants and barty grubs, how to tell if a goanna egg had a developing lizard inside or a yolk just by the markings on the shell. With no high school nearby, I went to boarding school in Perth at 11 and finished with an offer to study medicine at UWA. However, it was a gap year as a Rotary exchange student in South Africa where I saw human rights denied and a police state in action that made me decide to pull out of medicine and study politics and make a promise to myself that I would actively defend our wonderful democracy. My political life was not associated with any particular political party until I returned to regional WA, first to Kalgoorlie in the pastoral industry and then on to Esperance to expand into farming. As we struggled to rear our 4 beautiful kids, the neglect of regional services and the debilitating and demoralising effect of economic rationalist policies dreamt up in distant capital cities made me realise that we needed to take action before our regional towns and industries were left to wither and die. A defining moment for me was when a representative of the government of the day told an angry hall full of people in Esperance that if they did not like the price of power, they should move to Perth. If anyone was going to stand up for regional WA, it had to be the Nationals. However, at the time, the Nationals were far from capable to take on the task, with the prospect of one value legislation causing commentators to predict that the party would be reduced to 1 member. History shows that, contrary to popular belief, one vote, one value did not disenfranchise regional voters, it galvanised them. The leader of this resurgence was Brendan Grills, and I would like to pay tribute to his leadership and in particular his determination to stare down the naysayers and show by example that it's worth taking risks to achieve higher goals. Congratulations, Brendan, on your election to the seat of Pilbara. A defining moment for the Nationals, a demonstration that the Nationals is now a party capable of representing the vast array of interests that have one common thread, part of regional WA. And congratulations to those who took on the task of filling in behind him and knuckled down to retain the seats in our traditional heartland. It was truly a team effort involving a great deal of hard work, a fair bit of self-sacrifice and some miracle working with pretty scarce resources. Part of the strategy was to try for the seat of Kalgoorlie, a seat the Nationals have never won before. When John Bowler and Brendan Grills suggested I take it on, it did not take long before my husband Ian and I decided we were up for the challenge. The idea of returning to our roots was too tempting. Although I must say I will sorely miss the wonderful people and places I have served in the mining and pastoral region over the last 4.5 years. The Kalgoorlie electorate is 632,816 square kilometres and stretches from the stunning historic city of Kalgoorlie-Boulder north to my old stamping ground of Menzies and Kukaini, then on to Leonora, Leinster, Laverton and the incredible Nunandarra lands. Kalgoorlie-Boulder is a mature, cosmopolitan and diverse city of over 30,000 people that is capable of doubling its size by 2050. Mining is the dominant industry in the electorate, with mining production worth over $8.8 billion in 2010-11. The region is also well known for its pastoral industry, tourism, Aboriginal art and culture, and the beautiful and unique Great Western Woodlands, and of course, the Lake Ballard statues. In fact, it was the amazing buildings that caught the eye of Brendan Grills when I first took him to Kalgoorlie in around 2006. He remarked that you could see there was a boom there a century ago, and asked why people were living in Kalgoorlie in containers in the present boom towns of Karratha and Port Hedlands. This is where the seed for Royalties for Regions was sown. Since Paddy Hannon found gold in 1893, the mineral resources in the Goldfields Esperance region have extended to include nickel, cobalt, zinc, copper, silver, and more recently iron ore. For these mines to reach their full potential and for exploration and development to continue, we need to be mindful of the increasing costs the resources sector is facing. According to the Chamber of Minerals and Energy, the pressures are coming from many sources: project approval processes, duplication, time delays and complexity, imposed business costs, including the uncertainty of the changing taxation imposts of the MRRT and carbon pricing regime, productivity challenges, increasing labour costs and shortages, and increasing energy demand and cost. Over the last week, we've seen a significant fall in the price of gold, which will bring many operations perilously close to their break-even point. Cost pressures have seen the cash cost of producing gold rise from under $400 an ounce in 2002 to nearly $1,000 an ounce in the last quarter last year. These pressures must be taken into account in any review of the royalty regime, as it's important to maintain investor confidence in these uncertain times. Over the last 4 years, the seat of Kalgoorlie has seen great benefit from Royalties for Regions, and much of the thanks for this must go to the former member for Kalgoorlie, John Bowler. John was elected in 2001 and found himself in 2008 as an independent in a minority government. Very early in the piece, he threw his hat in the ring with Brendan Grills, and negotiations took place for the formation of government and commitment to the policy of Royalties for Regions. As a condition of his support, John saw the $58 million upgrade to Kalgoorlie Regional Hospital as one of the first projects to get off the ground under the Liberal National Government. Since that time, nearly $100 million of Royalties for Regions has been committed to the region, with notable projects being the Ray Finlayson Sporting Complex, the Kalgoorlie Indigenous Visitors Hostel, $20 million towards new student accommodation at the WA School of Mines, and $5 million for the detailed planning for the proposed transport hub in Kalgoorlie and strategic links to ports to the north and south. Funds have found their way into all corners of Goldfields life, refurbishing, reinvigorating and renewing not only infrastructure and public amenities, but hope and way of life and pride. Projects ranging from the caravan park in Menzies, the sporting complex in Leonora, the office complex in Warburton, through to playgroup and childcare centres, tourism strategies, disability support servants and event promotion have all played their part in redressing the neglect of decades. But there's much more to do, and the most important thing we must now remember as we go into the next phase of Royalties for Regions is that the policy is based on the mantra of local priorities and local decision-making. This is what has given the people of regional WA hope and a sense of excitement and the courage to come out and say what is needed and where they would like their community to go. We must be very careful as a government not to tread roughshod over this new strategic capability we have encouraged and nurtured in these long-neglected communities. I draw members' attention to work done through the Remote Focus Initiative facilitated by Desert Knowledge Australia. The project was under the leadership of Fred Chaney, a man for whom I have a great deal of respect and who has spent decades considering the state of our nation and the neglect of our remote and regional areas. In his report, Fixing the Hole in Australia's Heartland, it is noted that Australia is the most urbanised continent in the world, with more than 85% of our population living within 50 kilometres. The report looks at how remote Australia is governed and perceives government, and it had a particular focus on the Pilbara. It says, royalties for regions, I quote from the report, royalties for regions is a unilateral, that is, state policy, which addresses the traditional failure to provide financial resources to regions sufficient to meet their legitimate needs and aspirations. The next step is to ensure all government and the different Pilbara communities are on the same page, declaring loyalty for regions. And this cannot be done unilaterally. A particular necessity is the incorporation of Aboriginal interests into this process through their established representative structures. What concerns me, Mr Acting Speaker, is the talk of changing the focus of royalties for regions to more general infrastructure such as roads and rails, taking decision-making back to central control, and the hopes and visions of those we've enticed out to give their point of view and set their priorities will be dashed, their trust betrayed. Is this loyalty to regions? Fred Chaney himself, in his personal reflection in the report, noted that when he went around regional Western Australia in 2007 seeking views on a human rights bill, he said, "What we found was more demand for economic and social rights than civil and political rights. People felt shortchanged, and attitudes to government, not political parties, but government generally, were uniformly in terms of them not understanding us." He went on to say, "I have also been a sometime participant and a long-time observer of honest attempts by governments to do better. The uniformity of failure to match results with good intentions makes it clear to me that failure is not a matter of partisan politics or lack of good intentions or just getting policy settings wrong or having the wrong people. There is system failure here. The present instruments of government are not fit for remote Australia." He says, "Can Australia properly be a nation while there is a hole in our heartland? We think not." So, Mr Acting Speaker, I believe there's much more to do, and it's imperative that those who live and work in regions they love must have a very strong say in how the funding is prioritised. That is why, when the Nationals committed $150 million to the Goldfields Esperance Strategic Development Plan, we did not specify how the funding should be spent. It's not for distant politicians to decide what is more important for the Goldfields. Is it more doctors or a drag strip? The Goldfields Esperance Development Commission, Goldfields Voluntary Regional Organisation of Councils and Regional Development Australia have worked very closely with their communities and community organisations to identify priority projects for the expenditure of the $150 million that will enable the region to work towards the vision and strategies that will meet their critical needs as well as their aspirations. Some of the key priorities defined in the work done so far are for a community hub based on the new golf course in Kalgoorlie Boulder, town centre revitalisations in Menzies and Laverton, seniors accommodation and multi-purpose office accommodation for service providers in Leonora, sealing of the Outback Highway to improve access to the Nunandara lands, as well as upgrades to key infrastructure such as Laverton Hospital and the Goldfields Arts Centre. I would like now to turn to some of the priorities I see for my work as the new member for Kalgoorlie, things that will make a difference in the lives of the people of the Goldfields and the Nunandara lands. High priority is the severe GP shortage currently being experienced in the Goldfields. There's no doctor in Laverton or Kambalda, and the city of Kalgoorlie Boulder, by its population size, should have about 40 GPs. But by the 30th of January this year, 2013, it had dropped to 23. One of the major problems is that our local GPs are so overstretched that they do not have the capacity to supervise international medical graduates or new young doctors. But finding and recruiting doctors that do have these capabilities is virtually impossible. And yet there seems to be an unwillingness to accept that the system is broken. We need to look at new ways to meet the needs of people in regional areas. The Royalties for Region's Southern Inland Health Initiative has committed over $500 million in the southern half of the state. Some major progress has been made in recruiting doctors and installing telehealth equipment and employing nurse practitioners, yet we are still not breaking the back of this GP shortage. When Brendan Grills suggested a nurse practitioner for Laverton, it was ruled out by the AMA, which has also greeted new developments in telehealth with great reservation. What worries me, Mr Acting Speaker, is that the AMA is protecting the jobs its members do not want to fill. It's time to really rethink the provision of GP services in the regions. The medical workforce is changing. Doctors, an increasing number of whom are female, require more family-friendly working hours. The small family medical practice is confronted with the expensive and high-tech equipment acquired, burdensome reporting arrangements, and high insurance premiums. Many just want to be doctors, not small business owners. International medical graduates face a very difficult and often lonely road as they try to gain accreditation, and the burden on their supervising GP is immense. We need to use nurse practitioners and telehealth. We also need facilities where GPs can provide their services in a fully supported way, receiving a salary or remuneration for consultations without the burden of running a small business. Our upgraded regional hospitals must be used to train and supervise interns. Another area where we could make a real difference with a bit of attention, may I have an extension, Mr Acting Speaker? Thank you very much, is in the provision of mobile health services into Indigenous and remote communities. We have already seen the success of the Western Desert Kidney Health Project and the RFDS On the Road program, which have been supported by substantial Royalties for Regions funding and delivered primary health care and important health education and assessment through culturally appropriate mobile means. The Telethon Speech and Hearing Institute Earbus program is another such program which is really making a difference. Studies show that 40% of our Indigenous children acquire middle ear disease immediately after birth, and before the age of 2, 1 in 3 have a perforated eardrum. Research also shows that these children with hearing loss subsequently find education difficult, have a tendency to drop out or become socially disruptive, and an increased likelihood of finding themselves captured by the justice system. The Earbus program is making a huge difference to these children, and I would like to see the program extended statewide. Mr Acting Speaker, many of the inaugural speeches in the chamber this week have touched on the issue of alcohol consumption and its misuse having a detrimental effect on our community. The Goldfields have particularly been under the spotlight on this issue recently, with a Section 64 notice being issued to licensees and the subsequent application of liquor restrictions in the town. Per capita alcohol consumption in Kalgoorlie is consistently around twice the state average at 21.21 litres, with rates of nighttime assaults and acute alcohol-related hospitalisations substantially higher than the state average. The same can be said for drug possession, and with a dramatic increase in the availability of cannabis in Indigenous communities and high amphetamine use across the community. The Office of Crime Prevention shows that alcohol was a factor in 61.3% of assaults in Kalgoorlie-Boulder, and the Office of Racing and Gaming noticed that 80% of disorderly conduct offences are alcohol-related. I acknowledge the severity of these statistics, but I maintain that we must focus on the people who are unable to drink responsibly rather than apply ad hoc restrictions that impact on the majority who are able to drink safely and sociably. If we want to make our regional cities places where people want to live, work and spend their leisure time, we must be careful not to impose onerous and inequitable restrictions that make people feel like second-class citizens. I would, however, support a statewide approach to this issue. Considerable work needs to be done to deal with the excessive alcohol consumption in regional areas. Much more focus must be given to education, prevention, rehabilitation and policing. I have a particular concern about the prevalence of FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. We must get the message out that zero alcohol is the only safe level of consumption during pregnancy. Many people think that this problem is one that's only found in Aboriginal communities, but this is not true. It is a community-wide problem, although there are certainly tragic concentrations of children afflicted with FASD in places like the Fitzroy Valley, and I praise the women of that region for the groundbreaking work they have done in researching the disorder and its prevalence. The National Inquiry into Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders has made several recommendations, including rolling out a national FASD diagnostic and screening tool, placing warning labels on alcoholic beverages, public awareness campaigns, support and education for pregnant women, especially those with alcohol dependency. We must also push for FASD to be recognised as a disability so that those who are affected have access to support and services. Mr Acting Speaker, it seems mandatory that every election the issue of law and order is top of the list for attention and promises by candidates and political party. There is no doubt that we all have a right to live safely and secure in our homes, free from threats of assault or loss of possessions. However, sometimes it's too easy to see the solution as being through incarceration. My colleague and well-known Kalgoorlie Boulder police officer, who is now the member for Mining and Pastoral, the Honourable Dave Grills, has often discussed this issue with me and pointed out that from his experience, the vast majority of crimes are alcohol and drug related. That is perhaps where we should focus more of our resources rather than more beds in jails. The member for Norwest Central touched on this issue last night, but I would like to add some weight to his arguments. I note that we have on the front bench of this government some people with strong credentials in economics, so I'll quote from a cost-benefit analysis prepared by the National Indigenous Drug and Alcohol Committee. An economic analysis for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander offenders, prison versus residential treatment. Here is a snapshot of some of the statistics captured in that analysis. In 2011, 81% of Indigenous prisoners were convicted of a non-violent offence, and 70% of the Indigenous prisoners convicted of a violent offence have been previously convicted. Around 68% of Indigenous prisoners self-reported having used illicit drugs during the preceding 12 months, and based on data from New South Wales, Indigenous prisoners are also significantly more likely to be dependent on alcohol than non-Indigenous prisoners. Indigenous men were significantly more likely to report that they were intoxicated at the time of the offence for which they were incarcerated. Reoffending rates are high, and incarceration is associated with poor health outcomes for prisoners, including a relatively higher risk of mortality post-release. The estimated annual average cost per prisoner per day in 2012-13 is $315. In relation to diversion, in 2009-10, nearly 3/4 of residential treatment and rehabilitation services providing services to Indigenous clients had a waiting list. And yet the outcome from drug court participants, whether they completed the program successfully or not, were better than for the comparator group. Participants were less likely to be reconvicted of an offence, including offences against the person as well as drug offences. And the total average cost per client per day, including both operating and capital costs, is between $204 and $284. And the analysis concludes the total financial savings associated with diversion to community residential rehabilitation compared to prison is $111,458 per offender. Community residential treatment is also associated with better outcomes compared with prison, lower recidivism rates and better health outcomes. In monetary terms, these non-financial benefits have been estimated at an additional $92,759 per offender. So, Mr Acting Speaker, I'm asking that more government resources be directed to diversion of offenders and more accessible drug and alcohol rehabilitation services. In particular, I draw your attention to the excellent work being done by the Goldfields Rehabilitation Services, who have already expanded, and thanks to contribution from royalties for regions, but now need to expand further to meet the needs of the community. In particular, it needs accommodation for detoxification. This service is changing lives for the better and saving the state healthcare and law and order costs that would occur without rehabilitation. I would also particularly like to see the continuation and expansion of the excellent youth diversion work that's been carrying out with support from royalties for regions, much of it under the excellent leadership of the then Minister for Corrective Services, the Honourable Terry Redman. The Youth Justice Program has been very successful, and the Honourable Wayne Martin, Chief Justice of Western Australia, commented that funding from the Royalties for Regions program has resulted in a very significant strengthening of juvenile justice programs and facilities in the Kimberley and Pilbara, including through the provision of supervised bail facilities, and similar facilities in Geraldton and Kalgoorlie have dramatically reduced the number of children from regional WA in detention.
Excuse me, member, may I just interject? Could members in the House please keep their discussions outside the House, not in the House, particularly while we have someone on their feet giving an address in reply? Please pick it up again, member.
Thank you, Madam Acting Speaker. I would not be here today without the incredible and humbling support of so many people, the encouragement and wise counsel of so many residents of the Goldfields, and in particular my dynamic and diverse campaign team. They came from all sides of the political spectrum and decided that Kalgoorlie needed a national and state parliament. Without the leadership of Gary Brown and John Bowler, I would not have had that team. They did an amazing job, much of it without being asked. They are too numerous to list, but thanks must go to Don Hoddy, Beth Richardson, Terry Fleeton for their attention to detail. Graham Thompson, Paul Browning, Graham Campbell were always there with the strategic advice, and Cheryl and Greg Liddicoat, Anne Skinner, Jeff and Faye Jones, Gloria Moyle were ever ready to put on the green Kermit team t-shirt to make an impromptu appearance if required. Bryce Greytrix looked after the dollars, and thanks also to Gemma Crook, Georgia Blazevich, Steve Keane, Alexis Johnson, Dave Grills and Tony Crook for their work, as well as Nola and Ziggy Wolski. Family, of course, are the ones that keep you strong, that back you when you are feeling unsure, and that go the extra mile. And in fact, it was the extra thousands of miles that my wonderful husband Ian went with his brother Ross, 3 trips to the Nunandara lands, distributing material and then collecting not only mine, but everyone else's after the election. To my amazing parents, John and Maxine Tonkin, John is in the chamber, in the gallery this morning, both of whom have Orders of Australia for their service to the Goldfields. Thank you for your love, support and example. And to my 4 beautiful kids, Kat, Anna, Elise and James, I'm blessed to have your backing. You didn't have to do it, but you made the Kermit shirts look stunning. And you helped us man every polling booth in Kalgoorlie-Boulder with unpaid gorgeous young people. I want to conclude by thanking my Mining and Pastoral electorate staff, Margie Thomas-Close, Dorothy Henderson and Frances Archer. Your work is professional, efficient and above and beyond. You are my very dear friends, and I'm glad you will be still on the team with the successful election of Dave Grills. It's a great honour to be the member for Kalgoorlie, a real homecoming for me, and I look forward to the next 4 years working to reward the faith the people of Kalgoorlie have placed in me. Thank you.